For most of human history, healing only needed to be faster than death. The body did not have to last. It only had to survive long enough to reproduce, to protect offspring, to pass genes forward. Evolution never asked the human body to maintain itself for 80 or 90 years. It asked something far simpler and far colder. Repair just enough, heal just enough, then move on. What we call aging today may not be a failure of the body at all, but the quiet moment when healing stops being evolution's priority. If the human body was never designed to fully keep up with its own damage, then what does it really mean when we say the body is breaking down? Healing, in the human body, was never built as a promise of longevity. It was built as a tool for survival under pressure. In a world where injuries were common, infections were constant, and death often arrived early. For early humans, a wound that closed was not a step toward a long life, but a chance to keep moving, to keep hunting, to keep protecting offspring for a little longer. Healing did not exist to restore the body to its original state. It existed to prevent immediate failure. A broken bone that fused imperfectly was good enough if it allowed walking again. Scar tissue that stiffened muscle was acceptable if it stopped bleeding. Evolution rewarded outcomes that worked quickly, not outcomes that lasted beautifully. In that ancient context, there was no advantage in perfect repair, only in sufficient repair. The human body learned to patch itself, not to renew itself. Every act of healing was shaped by urgency, not by foresight. Damage accumulated quietly because it did not matter then. Most humans did not live long enough for that accumulation to become a visible problem. Survival into reproductive age was the goal, and once that goal was met, natural selection loosened its grip. This is the cold logic behind why healing is reactive rather than preventive. The body responds to injury after it happens, not by maintaining itself against future decline. That distinction is crucial. A system designed for survival reacts to threats. A system designed for longevity anticipates them. The human body does the former. It waits for damage, then responds just enough. In the lives of early humans, this made sense. Energy was scarce, food was unpredictable, movement meant survival. To invest heavily in long-term maintenance would have meant diverting precious energy away from immediate needs like immune defense, reproduction, or strength. Evolution consistently chose the cheaper option. Heal enough, then move on. Over tens of thousands of years, this strategy became deeply embedded in human biology. Tissues learned to close wounds quickly, even if the repair was crude. Cells learned to divide to replace lost neighbors, even if each division carried small errors forward. Organs learned to compensate rather than regenerate. These solutions were not mistakes. They were efficient answers to a short and dangerous life. When we observe the human body today struggling to keep up with aging, we are not witnessing a system breaking down unexpectedly. We are witnessing a system operating exactly as it was shaped to operate, in conditions very different from those it evolved under. The speed of healing reflects the speed of life that once defined our species. In a world where survival was measured in seasons rather than decades, healing only needed to outpace immediate threats. It did not need to outrun time itself. This is why the earliest signs of aging do not appear as sudden failures, but as subtle imbalances. Healing continues, but it no longer restores what was lost completely. Small inefficiencies appear. Repairs become slower, less precise, slightly more costly. For most of human history, these changes went unnoticed because life ended before they could compound. The body was never asked to prove that it could heal indefinitely. It was only asked to heal long enough. As modern humans live far beyond the conditions that shaped them, this ancient bargain becomes visible. The same healing system that once ensured survival now reveals its limits, not because it has weakened prematurely, but because it was never meant to compete with time on this scale. The question that quietly emerges is not when healing begins to fail, but why we expect it not to given the body's original purpose. To understand why healing was shaped this way, it helps to imagine the rhythm of an early human life. Days were structured around movement, risk, and uncertainty. The body was exposed constantly to cuts, infections, parasites, cold, hunger, and exhaustion. In that environment, healing could not afford to be slow or perfect. A wound that required months of careful regeneration would have been a death sentence. Speed mattered more than precision. The body learned to seal, to scar, to stabilize, because those responses kept blood inside, kept pathogens out, and allowed motion to resume. From an evolutionary perspective, a fast, imperfect repair was far more valuable than a slow, ideal one. Over time, this preference became biological habit. The human body optimized for immediate closure rather than long-term integrity. This is why many tissues heal by forming scar tissue instead of regenerating original structure. Scar tissue is quick to produce and strong enough to hold things together, but it lacks the flexibility and function of what it replaces. Evolution accepted this trade-off because flexibility decades later offered no advantage if the organism did not survive the next winter. The same logic applies across many systems of the body. Bones heal by thickening and fusing, sometimes altering their original alignment. Muscles repair by reinforcing damaged areas, often becoming less elastic. Even at the cellular level, repair mechanisms favor rapid replication over error-free copying. Each solution is efficient in the short term, but none are optimized for repeated use over a long lifespan. Importantly, the body does not possess a centralized plan for long-term upkeep. There is no biological calendar that says a human must remain structurally sound for 80 or 90 years. Instead, there are countless local responses, each addressing damage only when it appears. These responses do not communicate with a future self. They solve the present problem and move on. In early human populations, this worked remarkably well. Individuals who could heal quickly returned to hunting, gathering, and reproduction sooner. Their genes were passed on, reinforcing the same healing strategies in future generations. There was no evolutionary pressure to select for bodies that aged gracefully, because graceful aging did not increase reproductive success. Once offspring were old enough to survive independently, the biological mission was largely complete. Any additional years were, from evolution's point of view, optional. This perspective explains why healing efficiency declined so subtly. The system was never designed to notice its own long-term erosion. It only notices immediate threats. When damage accumulates slowly, spread across years, it falls below the threshold that triggers urgent repair. Aging, in this sense, is not treated as a crisis by the body because it does not arrive as one. It unfolds gradually, beneath the alarms that evolution installed. The human body excels at responding to acute injury, but it is almost indifferent to slow decay. That indifference is not negligence. It is a reflection of priorities set long before modern lifespans existed. When we look at aging today and see healing lag behind, we are observing a mismatch between ancient biological expectations and modern reality. The body continues to operate according to rules written for a shorter life, even as time stretches far beyond those original limits. The question then becomes whether aging is truly a process of decline, or simply the point at which the body's ancient strategy reveals itself fully. When healing is shaped by urgency, it quietly teaches the body a deeper habit: accept damage as normal. From the earliest stages of human evolution, the body learned that harm was not an exception but a constant condition of life. Cuts healed, bones mended, infections passed, yet none of these processes aimed to restore a state of untouched wholeness. Instead, the body learned to move forward with what remained. This mindset is embedded deeply in human biology. Healing does not ask what the body will need decades later. It asks only what is required to function tomorrow. That short horizon defines nearly every repair process in the human body. Once immediate stability is achieved, the system considers its job complete. Any remaining imperfection is tolerated, carried silently into the future. Over a short lifespan, these imperfections were insignificant. Over a long one, they become visible. This is where aging quietly begins to take shape. Not as a sudden collapse, but as a gradual accumulation of compromises. Each healed injury slightly alters the body's structure. Each repaired tissue becomes marginally less resilient than before. None of these changes are dramatic on their own. They do not trigger alarms or demand urgent correction, but they persist. Over time, the body becomes a record of its own survival, marked by countless small adjustments made under pressure. Importantly, evolution never instructed the body to erase that record. There was no advantage in returning tissues to a pristine state if survival and reproduction had already been secured. The cost of such perfection would have outweighed its benefits in an environment defined by scarcity. Energy spent on flawless repair would have been energy unavailable for finding food, escaping danger, or producing offspring. As a result, the human body evolved to live with damage rather than to eliminate it. This acceptance is not passive. It is an active strategy. By tolerating imperfection, the body preserves momentum. It keeps moving, keeps functioning, keeps passing genes forward. In the context of early human life, this strategy was extraordinarily successful. It allowed humans to survive in harsh environments, adapt to diverse climates, and spread across continents. The price of that success, however, was deferred. It was paid not in youth, but in age. As modern humans extend life far beyond its original evolutionary window, the cost becomes impossible to ignore. The same compromises that once ensured survival now accumulate into visible decline. Healing still occurs, but it does so on terms set long ago. It repairs without resetting. It stabilizes without renewing. This distinction explains why aging often feels like a gradual narrowing rather than a series of failures. The body does not suddenly stop healing. It continues, but each repair restores a little less than before. Strength returns, but not fully. Flexibility returns, but not completely. Recovery happens, but it takes longer and leaves deeper traces. From the body's perspective, nothing is going wrong. It is following rules that have worked for most of human existence. Aging is simply the long-term expression of those rules. It reveals what healing was always designed to do and what it was never meant to accomplish. When we look at the human body and ask why it ages faster than it can heal, the answer begins here. Healing was shaped to win short battles, not to sustain a long war against time. The body was built to endure a dangerous world briefly, not to preserve itself indefinitely. As time stretches beyond that original design, the imbalance becomes clear. Healing continues, but aging advances, not as an enemy, but as the natural outcome of a strategy that once served us well. Healing often gives the impression of reversal, as if damage has been undone and the body has returned to what it was before. But biologically, repair is not the same as erasure. When the human body heals, it does not rewind time. It moves forward from a changed state. This distinction is subtle, yet it sits at the core of why aging slowly overtakes healing. Every repair process leaves something behind. Not always visible, not always dramatic, but always present. A healed wound is never identical to uninjured tissue. A repaired structure carries a memory of disruption, embedded in its fibers, its cells, its organization. In early human life, this did not matter. The difference between original and repaired tissue rarely affected survival in the short term. What mattered was that the body could function again. The body learned to accept approximation as success. This acceptance shaped all subsequent layers of repair. At the cellular level, healing involves rapid responses to restore continuity. Cells divide, proteins assemble, structures stabilize. These processes prioritize speed and sufficiency, not perfection. Errors that do not immediately compromise function are tolerated. Over a single event, these imperfections are negligible. Over thousands of small events across a lifetime, they accumulate. The body does not possess a mechanism to audit its past repairs and correct them retroactively. Once stability is restored, the system moves on. This forward-only nature of healing means that damage is never fully removed. It is managed, redistributed, and integrated into the body's ongoing structure. In evolutionary terms, this was efficient. A system that attempted to restore absolute original conditions after every injury would have consumed enormous energy. For early humans living with limited resources, such a system would have reduced survival odds. Natural selection, therefore, favored bodies that could accept residual damage as a cost of staying alive. This is why many forms of healing rely on reinforcement rather than replacement. Instead of rebuilding exact originals, the body strengthens what remains. Tissues thicken, scar, stiffen, or adapt in ways that reduce immediate risk but subtly alter long-term performance. These changes are adaptive in the short run. They prevent rupture, bleeding, or collapse. Yet they also shift the body slightly away from its youthful state. Aging, from this perspective, is not a process that suddenly begins later in life. It is the slow revelation of countless earlier repairs that were never meant to be temporary. The body does not track how many times it has compensated. It only responds to what is happening now. This is why aging feels uneven. Some systems decline faster than others, depending on how often they were stressed, repaired, and altered throughout life. In early human environments, these differences were largely irrelevant. Few individuals lived long enough for cumulative repair to become a dominant factor. Those who did were exceptions, not the model evolution planned for. As modern humans extend life far beyond that historical norm, the hidden record of past repairs becomes visible. Stiff joints, slower recovery, reduced resilience are not signs of a system failing unexpectedly. They are signs of a system revealing its history. Healing never erased the damage. It carried it forward, quietly, efficiently, and without complaint. The body that ages is the same body that survived. What changes is not the quality of healing, but the length of time over which its consequences are allowed to accumulate. When we ask why the human body ages faster than it can heal, we begin to see that healing was never meant to reset the clock. It was meant to keep it ticking just long enough. The idea that healing leaves traces becomes clearer when we consider how the body handles repeated stress rather than single injuries. In early human life, the same tissues were often used, strained and repaired again and again. Walking long distances, carrying weight, climbing, running, and enduring cold placed continuous pressure on joints, muscles, and connective tissue. Each episode of strain triggered small repairs. None were dramatic enough to be remembered as injuries, yet each required the body to respond. Over time, these responses subtly altered structure. Healing reinforced what was stressed, thickened what was strained, and stiffened what was repeatedly loaded. These changes improved immediate function and reduced the chance of sudden failure. They allowed early humans to keep moving and working despite harsh conditions. But reinforcement is not the same as renewal. Reinforced tissue behaves differently from original tissue. It is often less flexible, less adaptable, and less efficient. The body accepts these trade-offs because they solve immediate problems. From an evolutionary point of view, there was no reason to restore youthful properties if basic function was preserved. The body did not need to remain optimal, it only needed to remain usable. This principle extends beyond muscles and joints. Organs adapt to stress by compensating rather than regenerating. When part of an organ is damaged or strained, remaining cells often work harder to maintain output. This keeps the system functioning, but at a cost. Increased workload accelerates wear, and future repairs become more likely. The body does not register this as a problem because function is maintained. Yet the long-term consequence is a gradual narrowing of resilience. Healing keeps systems operational, but it also quietly raises the baseline level of strain. Over decades, this creates a situation where the body appears to age unevenly. Some areas decline faster than others, depending on how often they were pushed to adapt. In early human populations, such uneven aging rarely mattered. Life was short, and survival depended more on adaptability than longevity. A body that could function reliably for a few decades was successful, regardless of how it might have aged later. Modern humans, however, live long enough for these accumulated adaptations to reveal their limits. The same reinforcements that once supported survival now restrict recovery. Healing still responds to stress, but each response builds on a structure that is already altered. This creates a subtle feedback loop. As tissues become less flexible, they are more prone to damage. As damage becomes more frequent, healing becomes more frequent. And as healing becomes more frequent, the original structure drifts further away from its youthful state. None of this is sudden or catastrophic. It unfolds slowly, beneath conscious awareness. The body experiences it not as failure, but as normal operation. From its perspective, nothing unusual is happening. It is adapting, compensating, and preserving function as it always has. Aging emerges not because healing stops, but because healing continues in a system that was never meant to return to its original condition repeatedly. The longer life extends, the more visible this process becomes. What we perceive as decline is often the long-term expression of countless successful adaptations. Healing has done its job, again and again. Aging is simply the record of that work, written across time. There is another quiet consequence of healing that rarely draws attention. Repair changes how the body responds to future damage. Each time tissue is repaired, the new structure sets the conditions for what comes next. Healing does not return the body to a neutral baseline. It establishes a new starting point. From that point forward, every subsequent repair builds upon what already exists. This layered process means that healing shapes the future trajectory of aging long before aging is visible. In early human life, this layering was largely inconsequential. Few individuals accumulated enough layers for the effects to matter. The body's priority was continuity, not optimization. As long as basic function was preserved, the system was considered successful. Over a long lifespan, however, the consequences of layered repair become unavoidable. Each adjustment slightly narrows the range of what the body can comfortably tolerate. Movements become less forgiving. Recovery becomes less complete. The margin for error shrinks. Healing still works, but it works within tighter constraints. Importantly, the body does not interpret this narrowing as a problem. From its perspective, it is responding appropriately to local conditions. The body has no global sense of decline. It does not track overall resilience. It only addresses immediate disruptions. This is why aging can progress without triggering a corrective response. There is no single moment when the body recognizes that it is losing ground. Damage arrives in small increments, and each increment is addressed successfully. Over time, the sum of those successes produces a state that looks like failure only when viewed from a long-term human perspective. Evolution did not equip the body with that perspective. It equipped it with tools to handle the present. This explains why healing and aging can coexist without contradiction. Healing does not slow aging because it was never designed to. It stabilizes function in the moment, even if doing so subtly reshapes the future. In early human environments, this trade-off was optimal. Individuals who healed quickly could continue contributing to the group and raising offspring. Their bodies did not need to remain adaptable indefinitely. Once survival and reproduction were achieved, further refinement offered no evolutionary advantage. As a result, natural selection did not favor mechanisms that could restore youthful structure repeatedly over decades. It favored mechanisms that worked reliably under pressure. When we extend life far beyond those original pressures, the design reveals its limits. The body continues to heal as it always has, but the cumulative effect of those healings becomes visible as aging. This perspective reframes decline not as loss, but as accumulation. The body carries forward the record of its survival, encoded in altered tissues and adjusted responses. Aging is the long shadow cast by countless moments when healing succeeded. Each scar, each reinforcement, each compensation represents a victory over immediate threat. Together, they shape a body that is stable but less flexible, resilient but less forgiving. From the inside, this feels normal. From the outside, it appears as gradual deterioration. The mismatch lies not in the body, but in our expectations. We expect healing to restore, to renew, to reverse time. Biology offers something different. It offers continuity at the cost of change. When we ask why the human body ages faster than it can heal, we confront this fundamental truth. Healing does not aim to keep pace with time. It aims to keep the organism functioning long enough for life's primary tasks to be completed. Everything beyond that was never guaranteed. Aging is not evidence that healing has failed. It is evidence that healing has been doing exactly what it was shaped to do, again and again, in a body now asked to last far longer than it was ever meant to. Every act of healing carries a cost, and that cost is paid in energy. The human body does not repair itself in isolation. It repairs itself while also needing to move, to think, to fight infection, to reproduce, and to remain alert in a dangerous world. Energy is never unlimited. For early humans, it was often scarce. Food availability changed with seasons, weather, and luck. Calories had to support survival first, not long-term upkeep. In that context, healing could not be allowed to consume more energy than necessary. The body learned to allocate resources carefully, prioritizing repairs that restored immediate function while avoiding those that demanded prolonged investment. This is why healing tends to be efficient rather than thorough. It aims to stabilize, not to perfect. From an evolutionary standpoint, a body that healed quickly and cheaply had a higher chance of surviving long enough to pass on its genes. A body that invested heavily in slow, meticulous repair risked running out of energy when it mattered most. Natural selection consistently favored the former. Over time, this preference shaped human biology at every level. Repair systems became optimized for speed and sufficiency, not endurance. Energy that could have been used to maintain tissues indefinitely was instead reserved for growth, reproduction, and immediate defense. This trade-off was invisible in short lives. Its consequences emerge only when life extends far beyond its original energetic assumptions. Healing slows with age, not simply because systems wear out, but because energy becomes increasingly constrained. As the body ages, more energy is required just to maintain basic balance. Less remains available for repair. Yet the body does not radically change its priorities. It continues to allocate resources according to ancient rules. Immediate threats are addressed. Long-term decline is tolerated. This explains why healing becomes less complete over time without ever truly stopping. The body is not choosing to age. It is choosing, again and again, to spend energy where it once mattered most. In early human environments, energy spent on long-term maintenance would not have increased survival. It would have reduced flexibility in the face of hunger, injury, and disease. Evolution therefore shaped a body that could survive uncertainty, not one that could preserve itself indefinitely. When we observe aging today, we often interpret it as loss. From a biological perspective, it is also evidence of consistent prioritization. The body continues to make the same calculations it always has, even as circumstances change. Energy that once supported survival through danger now supports survival through time. The problem is that time demands more than the system was built to give. Healing cannot keep pace, not because it has weakened, but because it was never granted the resources required to do so indefinitely. The human body ages faster than it can heal because healing was designed to be affordable, not eternal. It was shaped to function within the tight energetic limits of early human life, not within the extended lifespan of the modern world. As we live longer, the gap between what healing can afford and what time demands gradually widens, revealing the cost of an ancient bargain that once made survival possible. Energy constraints do not disappear once survival becomes easier. They change form. As the human body ages, it must spend more energy simply to maintain internal balance. Processes that were once efficient become less so. Muscles require more effort to perform the same work. The immune system demands greater resources to respond to familiar threats. Basic regulations such as temperature control and tissue maintenance consumes a larger share of available energy. This leaves less capacity for repair, even when damage is modest. Healing does not slow because the body forgets how to heal. It slows because the energetic margin that once supported rapid repair has narrowed. In early human life, energy allocation favored growth, reproduction, and defense. Those priorities did not vanish with age. They persisted, even as the body's capacity declined. Evolution did not redesign energy budgets for extended lifespans because extended lifespans were not the norm. As a result, the aging body continues to operate with a budget planned for a shorter life. This mismatch becomes more pronounced over time. Each repair competes with countless other demands, many of which are invisible but constant. The body must keep organs functioning, maintain circulation, and preserve basic coordination. These tasks are non-negotiable. When energy becomes limited, healing yields first, not because it is unimportant, but because it can be delayed without immediate collapse. This delay accumulates. Repairs become slower, less complete, and more selective. The body chooses which damage to address and which to tolerate. From the outside, this looks like decline. From the inside, it is triage. This process mirrors the conditions of early human life, where energy scarcity forced constant prioritization. The body is repeating an ancient pattern in a modern context. What has changed is the timescale. In the past, periods of scarcity were temporary. Today, scarcity takes the form of gradual energetic limitation within a longer life. The same rules apply, but their consequences stretch across decades. Healing becomes a secondary priority, handled when resources allow. Aging emerges not because healing fails outright, but because it is consistently outcompeted. The body continues to solve immediate problems while deferring long-term maintenance. This strategy once maximized survival. Now, it reveals its limits. The human body was never shaped to support unlimited repair under expanding energetic demands. It was shaped to survive uncertainty, not to sustain perfection. As time lengthens, energy becomes the silent factor that determines how much healing remains possible. Aging advances not as a sudden event, but as the cumulative outcome of countless small decisions made under constraint. The body is not running out of instructions. It is running out of margin. As energy becomes constrained, the body does not abandon healing entirely. Instead, it changes the kind of healing it can afford. Early in life, repair tends to be broad and responsive. Many systems are able to mobilize quickly, drawing on reserves that are relatively abundant. With age, those reserves shrink. Healing becomes more selective, more localized, and more conservative. The body begins to favor repairs that preserve basic function over those that restore full capacity. This shift is subtle. It does not announce itself as failure. It appears as longer recovery times, reduced flexibility, and incomplete restoration. From the body's perspective, this is not decline. It is efficiency under constraint. The system is doing what it has always done, matching repair to available energy. What changes is the scale of what is possible. In early human environments, this adjustment was rarely noticed. Few individuals lived long enough for energetic limitations to accumulate into a defining feature of life. Those who reached older ages often did so within social structures that valued their experience rather than their physical performance. The body did not need to remain robust. It needed only to remain functional enough to contribute. Evolution did not penalize the gradual reduction of repair capacity because it did not significantly affect reproductive success. As a result, the mechanisms that govern energy allocation and healing remain tuned to early life priorities. When modern humans extend life far beyond those priorities, the same mechanisms persist. Healing continues, but it does so within tighter energetic boundaries. This creates a growing gap between the damage that accumulates and the repair that can be delivered. The body compensates by adapting behavior, reducing risk, and conserving movement. These adaptations further limit the stimuli that once supported tissue renewal. A feedback loop emerges. Reduced activity conserves energy but also reduces regenerative signaling. Healing slows not because the body is incapable, but because the conditions that once supported robust repair no longer exist. Aging, in this light, is not a single process. It is the combined outcome of energetic limitation, conservative repair, and adaptive restraint. Each element reinforces the others. The body gradually shifts from a state of active restoration to one of careful preservation. It chooses stability over renewal. This choice is not conscious. It is the inevitable result of operating within finite resources over an extended period. When we look at the aging body and see healing falling behind, we are witnessing the long-term consequences of a system designed for efficiency rather than longevity. Energy that once powered rapid repair is now spread thin across maintenance tasks that cannot be postponed. Healing becomes slower, narrower, and less forgiving. Yet it never truly stops. It persists, quietly, within the limits imposed by time. The human body ages faster than it can heal, not because it lacks the will to repair, but because it was never given the energy budget to sustain repair indefinitely. This realization reframes aging as a process shaped by necessity rather than neglect. The body is not failing to meet modern expectations. It is faithfully executing an ancient strategy, one that prioritized survival under scarcity and accepted decline as the cost of enduring long enough to matter. At the deepest level of healing lies the behavior of cells themselves. Every repair the body performs depends on cells dividing, replacing, and reorganizing. Yet human cells were never designed to divide endlessly. Each division carries a small cost, a subtle alteration that cannot be fully reversed. In early human life, this limitation was irrelevant. Cells divided when needed, tissues recovered, and the organism moved on. The number of divisions required within a short lifespan remained well within safe bounds. Evolution did not demand more. What mattered was that cells could respond quickly to injury and maintain basic function through youth and early adulthood. Beyond that window, there was little selective pressure to preserve unlimited cellular renewal. The human body therefore evolved with built-in limits at the cellular level, limits that only become apparent when life stretches far longer than originally expected. Healing depends on cells that can respond rapidly, but not indefinitely. Each time a cell divides, it copies itself with remarkable accuracy, yet not perfect fidelity. Tiny errors slip through, changes that are usually harmless in the short term. Over time, however, these changes accumulate. Cells adapt, compensate, and continue functioning, but they slowly drift away from their original state. This drift does not trigger alarm. It does not announce itself as damage. It simply alters how tissues behave. In early human environments, the consequences of this drift rarely surfaced. Individuals did not live long enough for cumulative cellular changes to dominate their health. The body's design assumed this. Healing relied on the availability of responsive cells, not on the promise of eternal renewal. This is why many tissues in the human body repair by replacement rather than regeneration. They fill gaps, restore continuity, and stabilize structure, but they do not recreate original complexity perfectly. At the cellular level, healing is an act of substitution, not restoration. The body trades exactness for speed and reliability. From an evolutionary perspective, this was an optimal solution. A system that demanded flawless cellular renewal would have required immense energy and intricate control mechanisms. Such complexity offered no advantage in a world where survival was uncertain and time was short. Natural selection favored simpler rules that worked consistently, even if they imposed long-term limits. As modern humans live longer, those limits become visible. Cells respond more slowly. Replacement becomes less precise. Tissues lose some of their ability to reorganize fully after damage. Healing still occurs, but its foundation has shifted. The cellular workforce that once supported rapid repair is now constrained by its own history. This does not represent failure. It represents the exposure of boundaries that were always present but rarely tested. Aging emerges when the demand for cellular renewal exceeds what the system was built to supply. The body does not possess a reserve of untouched cells waiting for late life. It relies on the same populations that have been dividing, adapting, and compensating for decades. Their capacity is finite because it was never required to be infinite. Healing slows not because the body stops trying, but because its basic units are operating near the edges of what they can sustain. This perspective shifts how we understand decline. Aging is not imposed from outside. It arises from within the normal operation of a system designed for efficiency under constraint. Cells do what they were shaped to do. They divide when necessary, tolerate small changes, and prioritize immediate stability. Over a long life, the cumulative effect of these choices becomes visible as reduced regenerative capacity. Healing continues, but it does so on a foundation that has been gradually altered by time. When we ask why the human body ages faster than it can heal, we must look here, at the cellular level, where healing was never meant to outrun the limits built into life itself. As cellular limits begin to assert themselves, healing does not stop outright. Instead, it subtly changes its character. Cells become more cautious in how they divide and respond. This caution is not accidental. It reflects another evolutionary trade-off embedded deep within human biology. Rapid and unlimited cell division carries risks. In early human life, those risks were acceptable because the priority was quick recovery and continued survival. But as time passes, accumulated cellular changes increase the danger of uncontrolled growth. The body responds by tightening regulation. Cell division becomes more selective. Replacement slows. This protective restraint reduces immediate risk, but it also reduces regenerative potential. Healing becomes safer, but less powerful. In evolutionary terms, this was a sensible compromise. A system that allowed aggressive cellular repair indefinitely would have increased the likelihood of catastrophic malfunction later in life. Natural selection favored caution once reproduction was complete. From that point forward, preserving stability mattered more than restoring youth. This shift does not occur at a single age. It unfolds gradually, guided by local signals and accumulated history. Cells respond to their environment, sensing stress, damage, and prior divisions. Over time, they become less willing to divide, less capable of reorganizing tissue fully. Healing still occurs, but it relies increasingly on maintenance rather than renewal. Damaged areas are stabilized, reinforced, or isolated rather than rebuilt. In early human populations, this strategy rarely revealed its downside. Most individuals did not live long enough for reduced regenerative capacity to dominate their experience. The body's cautious approach served its purpose well. It reduced the chance of sudden failure and allowed individuals to function reliably through the years that mattered most. In modern life, however, the consequences are more visible. As people live longer, the balance between protection and repair shifts further toward protection. Healing becomes slower not because the body has forgotten how to heal, but because it is actively avoiding risks that were once irrelevant. This creates an apparent paradox. The same mechanisms that protect the body from severe dysfunction also limit its ability to recover fully. Cells that could divide rapidly earlier in life now hesitate. Tissues that once reorganized easily now resist change. From the outside, this appears as decline. From the inside, it is restraint. The body is choosing stability over flexibility. This choice reflects ancient priorities. In an unpredictable environment, stability increased survival odds. Flexibility beyond a certain point offered diminishing returns. Evolution encoded this logic into cellular behavior. As a result, healing and aging become intertwined. The slowdown of repair is not merely the result of wear, it is also the outcome of protective strategies that evolve to manage long-term risk. Aging reveals the cumulative effect of those strategies. The body becomes increasingly resistant to change, even when change could restore function. Healing continues, but it does so within narrower boundaries. Cells preserve what exists rather than recreate what was lost. This explains why late-life healing often restores function partially but rarely completely. The system has shifted its goal. It no longer aims to recreate youthful structure. It aims to maintain order. When we observe healing falling behind aging, we are seeing the consequence of a design that values control over renewal once the primary tasks of life have been completed. The body is not failing to heal. It is healing according to rules shaped for a world where living long enough mattered more than living forever. When cellular caution becomes the dominant mode, healing enters its most limited phase. The body no longer approaches damage with the assumption that full restoration is possible or desirable. Instead, it treats damage as something to be contained. Cells prioritize preventing disruption over rebuilding complexity. This marks a critical turning point in the relationship between healing and aging. The mechanisms that once allowed rapid replacement now emphasize boundaries, isolation, and stability. Damaged cells are prevented from spreading harm, but they are not always replaced with equal function. Tissues become organized around preservation rather than renewal. This shift reflects a deeper biological judgment. The risk of instability now outweighs the benefit of regeneration. In early human life, instability was a lesser concern. Rapid cell activity increased survival when time horizons were short. Later in life, the same activity posed greater danger. The body adapted accordingly. Healing strategies evolved to reduce uncertainty, even at the expense of adaptability. This transformation is gradual and largely invisible. There is no clear moment when cells decide to stop restoring. Instead, the balance slowly tilts. Repair pathways become conservative. Replacement becomes selective. Areas that once regenerated efficiently now rely on structural reinforcement. The result is a body that remains intact, but less responsive. Healing does not disappear, but it becomes constrained by protective limits that were always part of the design. In early human populations, this constraint rarely surfaced as a problem. Life ended before repair limitations dominated experience. The body fulfilled its role successfully. As modern humans live longer, these limits shape daily reality. Injuries heal more slowly. Recovery leaves greater residue. Flexibility diminishes. These changes are not signs of neglect. They are the expected outcome of a system that has shifted priorities. At the cellular level, aging represents the triumph of control over regeneration. The body chooses order over possibility. This choice preserves function in the face of accumulated change, but it also restricts the scope of healing. From an evolutionary perspective, this was a rational strategy. A body that remained stable, even if less capable, was preferable to one that risked collapse through excessive renewal. The cost of this stability emerges only when life extends far beyond its original frame. Healing can no longer keep pace because it is operating under constraints designed to prevent greater harm. Aging advances not as an error, but as the visible boundary of those constraints. The body continues to do what it has always done: manage risk, preserve structure, and prioritize survival over renewal. When we look at the aging human body and wonder why healing seems to fall behind, we are seeing the outcome of cellular decisions made in service of stability. Healing has not failed. It has reached the limits that were built into it from the beginning. The human body ages faster than it can heal, because healing was never meant to overcome its own safeguards. It was meant to work within them. Over a long life, those safeguards become the defining feature of decline. Aging does not arrive as a visible event. It does not begin with collapse, illness, or obvious failure. It begins much earlier, at a point so quiet that the body does not register it as change. The body continues to heal. Cuts still close. Muscles still recover. Bones still mend. What shifts is not the presence of healing, but its balance against daily damage. For the first time, healing restores slightly less than what is lost. This difference is small, almost unnoticeable, yet it marks a fundamental transition. The body enters a state where repair no longer fully matches wear. This moment is the true beginning of aging. It is not dramatic. It does not trigger alarm. It passes unnoticed because life continues as normal. In early human life, this imbalance rarely mattered. The body was young, energy was abundant, and cellular systems operated far from their limits. Small imperfections were absorbed without consequence. Healing easily exceeded damage. Over time, however, the margin narrowed. Each day introduced small stresses: movement, digestion, immune responses, exposure to the environment. Individually, these stresses were insignificant. Together, they created a constant background demand for repair. Early in life, healing met this demand completely. Later, it met it partially. Recovery still happened, but it left behind tiny deficits. These deficits did not accumulate quickly. They spread slowly, across years, often decades. The body did not recognize them as a problem because function remained intact. Stability persisted. From an evolutionary perspective, this was acceptable. The human body was shaped to prioritize survival through youth and early adulthood. Once reproduction and offspring survival were secured, there was little selective pressure to maintain perfect repair indefinitely. Healing systems were calibrated for earlier stages of life, where rapid recovery supported immediate survival. They were never optimized for long-term balance. As a result, when healing began to fall slightly behind, there was no mechanism to correct course. The body continued operating according to rules that had always worked. There was no emergency response for gradual imbalance. No signal declared that time had become the dominant threat. The system responded to acute injuries while quietly tolerating slow decline. Aging progressed beneath awareness because it did not violate any biological priority. From the body's perspective, nothing was wrong. Organs functioned. Movement continued. Life went on. Only from a long-term human viewpoint does the shift become visible. Modern humans, living far longer than their ancestors, experience this phase as a defining feature of life. Recovery feels slower, resilience feels reduced, yet these sensations do not represent failure. They represent exposure. Ancient healing strategies are now operating on a timescale they were never shaped to handle. The body is still doing exactly what it evolved to do. It is just doing it for much longer than expected. Aging begins not when healing stops, but when healing quietly loses ground, day after day, without protest. It is not a breakdown. It is the moment when time finally reveals the limits of a system built to heal just long enough, not forever. Once healing begins to fall slightly behind daily damage, the body enters a new pattern of living that is still unfamiliar to its own biology. This pattern is defined not by collapse, but by compensation. The body adapts quietly, redistributing effort to maintain function even as repair becomes less complete. Muscles adjust how they move. Joints alter their range. Organs compensate by increasing workload in undamaged areas. These adjustments allow life to continue smoothly, often without conscious awareness. From the outside, everything appears normal. From the inside, the system is working harder to achieve the same results. In early human life, this kind of compensation was rarely sustained for long periods. Either the body recovered fully, or life ended before compensation became a permanent state. The human body was not shaped to live for decades in a mode of partial repair, yet that is precisely what modern longevity demands. Healing continues, but it now shares space with adaptation. Instead of restoring what was lost, the body reorganizes around it. This reorganization is efficient in the short term. It preserves stability and prevents immediate failure. However, it also shifts stress to other systems. Areas that compensate become more vulnerable to future strain. Over time, the cost of compensation accumulates. Healing must now address not only new damage, but also the strain created by earlier adaptations. This layered burden further slows recovery. The body responds by refining its priorities. It becomes increasingly selective about what it repairs fully and what it merely stabilizes. From an evolutionary perspective, this selectivity makes sense. In early environments, energy and resources were unpredictable. A body that could preserve essential function through compensation had a survival advantage. Long-term structural perfection offered no additional benefit. Natural selection favored systems that could adjust quickly and move on. As a result, the human body learned to accept imbalance as long as life continued. Aging represents the prolonged exposure of this strategy. The longer compensation persists, the more visible its limits become. Recovery feels incomplete not because healing has failed, but because healing is now operating within a structure shaped by years of adjustment. The body is no longer restoring an original form. It is maintaining a modified one. This distinction is subtle but profound. It explains why aging often feels like narrowing rather than sudden loss. Capabilities do not vanish overnight. They become constrained. Movement becomes more cautious. Recovery demands more rest. Resilience depends increasingly on avoidance rather than renewal. From the body's point of view, this is sensible behavior. Risk reduction conserves energy and preserves stability. In early human life, such restraint would have been temporary. In modern life, it becomes chronic. The body does not recognize that this state is meant to last for decades. It treats it as an extended period of adaptation, not as a new normal. Healing continues to respond to acute injury, but it does so against a backdrop of accumulated compensation. Each repair must fit within an already altered structure. This reduces flexibility and slows full restoration. Aging, in this sense, is not simply the passage of time. It is the long-term consequence of living in a body that heals by adapting rather than resetting. The human body was never designed to sustain this mode indefinitely. It was designed to use it briefly, then move on. Modern longevity removes the exit. What remains is a body that survives by constant adjustment, healing just enough to continue, but never enough to return. This is how aging quietly deepens, not through failure, but through the persistence of strategies that once ensured survival under entirely different conditions. As compensation becomes the body's default response, a new illusion emerges, the illusion of stability. Life continues. Daily tasks are completed. The body appears to function, often convincingly. Yet beneath this surface, healing and aging are no longer balanced partners. Stability is being maintained not by restoration, but by restraint. The body learns to avoid extremes. Movements become more economical. Effort is distributed more carefully. Recovery is paced to prevent further strain. These adjustments reduce immediate risk, but they also narrow the range within which healing can operate. The body is no longer experimenting with renewal. It is protecting what remains. In early human life, this phase was brief. Individuals either recovered fully or did not survive long enough for restraint to define their biology. The human body was not shaped to remain in this cautious mode for decades. Modern longevity extends this phase far beyond its original purpose. Healing continues, but it does so inside increasingly rigid boundaries. The body favors predictability over possibility. This creates a paradox. The more the body stabilizes itself, the less capable it becomes of true recovery. Tissues that avoid stress receive fewer signals to renew. Systems that operate within narrow limits lose adaptability. Healing slows not because the body lacks ability, but because it is actively minimizing change. From an evolutionary perspective, this made sense. In uncertain environments, stability reduced the chance of catastrophic failure. A body that avoided risk was more likely to survive through immediate threats. Evolution rewarded caution once survival and reproduction were secured. What it did not anticipate was a lifespan long enough for caution itself to become a limiting factor. Over time, the cost of restraint accumulates. Healing becomes increasingly conservative. Repairs restore basic function but rarely rebuild lost capacity. The body accepts a lower standard of repair in exchange for reduced risk. This trade-off is subtle and rarely perceived as decline at first. It feels like normal aging because it unfolds gradually and consistently. The body does not resist it. It cooperates with it. Aging deepens as the body settles into this restrained equilibrium. From the inside, this equilibrium feels sensible. Energy is conserved. Stability is preserved. Life continues. From the outside, it appears as reduced resilience and slower recovery. Neither perspective is wrong. They reflect different timescales. The body is responding appropriately to immediate conditions, while humans evaluate outcomes across decades. This mismatch explains why aging feels inevitable rather than accidental. The body is not losing a battle. It is maintaining a peace that limits growth. Healing has not failed. It has adapted to priorities that no longer align with extended life. As restraint becomes permanent, the gap between damage and repair widens further. Healing still responds to injury, but it does so within a framework that prioritizes safety over restoration. Each successful stabilization reinforces the pattern. The body becomes increasingly skilled at maintaining a reduced state rather than rebuilding a fuller one. Aging accelerates not through sudden decline, but through the long-term consequences of this strategy. The human body ages faster than it can heal, because healing has shifted its goal. It no longer seeks to restore what was lost, it seeks to prevent further loss. This distinction defines late-life biology. The body survives by narrowing its world. Movements are chosen carefully. Recovery is conservative. Healing is present, but restrained. This is not a flaw. It is the final expression of a design shaped for survival under pressure. When we recognize this, aging appears less like a failure of healing, and more like the outcome of a system that has reached the edge of what it was built to sustain. To understand why aging unfolds the way it does, we have to look at where evolution placed its attention. Evolution does not aim for fairness across a lifetime. It aims for success at specific moments. For humans, those moments were concentrated early. Survival through childhood, strength in early adulthood, and the ability to produce and protect offspring were the stages that mattered most. Traits that supported these stages were favored, reinforced, and passed on. Traits whose benefits appeared later were largely invisible to natural selection. This uneven focus shaped the human body in subtle but lasting ways. Healing capacity, energy allocation, and resilience were optimized for youth, not for old age. In early human populations, this made sense. Life was unpredictable. Many did not survive to adulthood. Of those who did, fewer lived long beyond the years of reproduction. Evolution invested where returns were reliable. It strengthened bodies when strength mattered most. It refined healing when rapid recovery meant survival and reproduction. Beyond that window, the biological future carried little weight. As a result, the body's systems are front-loaded. They perform best early, then gradually shift toward maintenance rather than improvement. Healing follows this pattern. Early in life, repair is fast, flexible, and generous. Later, it becomes selective and conservative. This is not because the body is deteriorating prematurely. It is because the phase that evolution optimized has passed. The human body does not possess a second design for late life. It relies on the same mechanisms. Stretched across decades, they were never shaped to cover. This creates a quiet asymmetry. Youth receives abundance. Age receives leftovers. From a biological perspective, this is not neglect. it is efficiency. Natural selection rewarded systems that delivered early success, even if they carried hidden costs later. Genes that improved early survival spread widely, even if they contributed to decline in later years. Those later effects did not reduce reproductive success, so they were not filtered out. Over time, this pattern became deeply embedded. The human body learned to invest heavily at the beginning, then gradually reduce investment as time progressed. Healing reflects this logic. It is strongest when the body's future matters most to evolution. As that future narrows, so does the commitment to repair. In early human life, this decline was rarely observed. Few individuals lived long enough for reduced healing to define their experience. Those who did often occupied roles where physical decline did not threaten group survival. Knowledge, memory, and social cohesion mattered more than strength. The body did not need to remain youthful to remain useful. Modern humans, however, live in a world where longevity is common and physical capacity is often expected to persist. This exposes the limits of a design that never planned for extended maintenance. Healing begins to fall behind not because the body is failing, but because its priorities were set elsewhere. Aging reveals the point at which evolutionary investment tapers off. The body continues to function, but it does so with decreasing support. Repair still occurs, but it is no longer the primary concern. Stability replaces optimization. Preservation replaces renewal. This shift is gradual and often misunderstood. We tend to view it as loss. From an evolutionary perspective, it is simply the end of a phase. The human body was never meant to distribute its resources evenly across time. It was meant to peak early, succeed quickly, and accept decline as an acceptable cost. Aging begins when we live long enough to experience that acceptance. The body does not resist it because it has no reason to. Healing slows because the evolutionary story that built it has already reached its intended conclusion. This early life focus does more than shape strength and healing. It quietly shapes what the body is willing to tolerate later. Because evolution rewarded success in youth, it also allowed certain long-term costs to pass unnoticed. Traits that improved early survival were preserved even if they slowly undermined the body over time. As long as those costs appeared after reproduction, they did not interfere with evolutionary success. The human body, therefore, carries features that are beneficial early and burdensome later. Not by accident, but by design. Healing systems are part of this pattern. Early in life, rapid repair reduces the risk of death from injury and infection. Later, the same repair strategies leave behind structural compromises that accumulate. Evolution did not correct this because there was no pressure to do so. The future beyond early adulthood was not a priority. This explains why aging feels like a delayed consequence rather than a sudden change. The body is not switching modes. It is continuing along a path set long ago. Healing becomes less effective not because it was meant to last forever, but because it was never required to. In early human environments, extended maintenance would have consumed resources without improving reproductive success. Natural selection favored efficiency over foresight. It built bodies that could succeed quickly, not ones that could remain optimal indefinitely. As a result, many biological systems are tolerant of slow degradation. They allow small inefficiencies to persist as long as overall function is preserved. Healing addresses immediate threats while overlooking gradual decline. This tolerance is invisible when life is short. It becomes defining when life is long. Modern humans encounter the long shadow of early life optimization. The same genes that supported rapid growth, strong immunity, and vigorous healing in youth now contribute to slower recovery and increased vulnerability. This is not a contradiction, it is a consequence. Evolution does not plan across a lifetime, it plans across generations. What matters is whether traits are passed on, not how they perform decades later. Aging emerges where this logic ends. The body continues to operate according to priorities that no longer match the length of modern life. Healing systems still respond as they always have, but the context has changed. The body is asked to maintain itself long after the evolutionary incentive to do so has faded. This mismatch explains why aging feels inevitable. It is not imposed by time alone. It is embedded in the way the body was shaped to succeed early and accept decline later. Healing slows because the body has already delivered what evolution required. Everything beyond that point is extra time, lived on mechanisms never meant to stretch so far. Late life, in evolutionary terms, was never a destination, it was a byproduct. Once reproduction had succeeded and offspring could survive without constant protection, natural selection largely stepped back. The body did not receive new instructions for what came next. There was no evolutionary requirement to preserve strength, speed, or rapid healing beyond usefulness to the group. As a result, aging unfolds in a space that biology treats as optional. The body maintains order, but it does not invest in improvement. Healing persists, yet it does so without urgency. This acceptance is not resignation. It is alignment with ancient priorities. Systems stabilize rather than expand. Repair becomes conservative, aimed at preventing collapse rather than restoring youth. In early human societies, this was sufficient. Older individuals contributed knowledge, memory, and social cohesion. Physical decline did not threaten survival in the same way it would have earlier. Evolution therefore tolerated it. There was no penalty for allowing healing to slow once the primary tasks of life were complete. This tolerance shaped how late life is managed biologically. The body does not fight aging as an enemy. It accommodates it as a condition. Signals that once drove aggressive repair are dampened. Energy is redirected toward maintaining balance. Risk is minimized. From a long view, this strategy reduced catastrophic failure. It kept organisms functional, if limited, for as long as circumstances allowed. In modern life, where longevity is common, this accommodation becomes visible as decline. Healing feels insufficient because it is no longer prioritized, yet the body is not malfunctioning. It is behaving consistently with a design that never promised renewal at the end of life. Aging deepens as the body settles into this acceptance. The gap between damage and repair widens, not through neglect, but through restraint. Healing answers emergencies. It does not chase perfection. Over time, this produces a stable but narrowed state. The body continues, quieter and slower, carrying forward what it can preserve. When we expect late life to mirror youth, we misunderstand the evolutionary bargain that built us. Biology optimized beginnings, not endings. Healing was tuned to early success, not prolonged maintenance. The later years were left open, governed by stability rather than ambition. Aging, in this light, is not a failure to heal. It is the phase where healing has fulfilled its purpose and yields to preservation. The human body ages faster than it can heal, because it was never asked to do more than this. Within this phase, the body relies increasingly on habits rather than repair. Patterns of movement become predictable. Metabolism favors consistency over flexibility. Healing responses are calibrated to avoid surprise. This reduces volatility, but it also limits recovery. Late life becomes a period of careful continuity. The organism survives by narrowing choices. From an evolutionary lens, this conservatism was acceptable. It preserved individuals long enough to support kin and transmit experience. Selection did not demand more. Modern expectations, however, ask the body to remain adaptable, strong, and renewable far beyond this point. The mismatch creates frustration. We sense that healing should restore what time removes. Biology offers a different promise. It offers persistence without renewal. When aging accelerates relative to healing, it signals that preservation has overtaken repair as the dominant goal. This transition is quiet, lawful, and predictable. It does not depend on disease. It arises from ordinary living extended over many years. The body keeps functioning by reducing risk, conserving energy, and stabilizing structures. Healing continues, but it works within limits that favor safety over possibility. Understanding this reframes late life not as a collapse, but as a managed descent shaped by ancient priorities. The body remains faithful to its origins. It does not rebel against time. It cooperates with it. Modern human lifespan has created a situation that evolution never rehearsed. For most of our species' history, living long enough to experience advanced aging was rare. The body's limits existed, but they remained largely hidden because time ran out first. Today, those limits are exposed not by disease but by duration. When life stretches beyond its original evolutionary window, The design assumptions built into the body begin to show. Healing systems that once appeared sufficient now reveal where they were never meant to operate. This does not mean the body has changed. It means the context has. Longevity has moved faster than biology. The human body still follows rules shaped in a world where reaching old age was uncommon. As a result, modern life places sustained demands on systems designed for brief endurance. Healing must now compete with decades of accumulated wear. Early in life, repair meets demand. Later, demand persists while capacity plateaus. The imbalance grows slowly, almost invisibly. Modern longevity does not cause aging. It reveals it. It allows processes that once remained background noise to become dominant features of experience. In earlier eras, aging rarely defined identity. Survival, reproduction, and immediate threats mattered more. Today, aging becomes a central narrative because time allows it to unfold fully. The body responds as it always has, by stabilizing function rather than reinventing itself. Healing continues, but it does so within boundaries that were set long before extended lifespans were common. This creates a sense of mismatch. We expect bodies to maintain youthful repair across many decades. Biology never agreed to that expectation. The human body was shaped to survive uncertainty, not to preserve peak condition indefinitely. As time accumulates, the cost of this design becomes clearer. Recovery takes longer, repairs restore less. Adaptation replaces renewal. These are not malfunctions. They are predictable outcomes of a system operating beyond its intended time frame. Modern humans live inside a biological extension. We have lengthened life without redesigning the body that lives it. Healing systems respond faithfully, but they were never built to scale with longevity. This is why aging feels like a gradual unveiling rather than a sudden change. The rules were always there. Time simply exposes them. When we examine the aging body, we are not seeing new weaknesses emerge. We are seeing old compromises become visible. The body prioritizes continuity over restoration because that strategy once ensured survival. In a long life, the same strategy produces decline. Healing is not failing faster. Time is lasting longer. The human body ages faster than it can heal because healing was never designed to outrun decades of cumulative strain. Modern longevity turns what was once a background process into the defining feature of life. The body continues to function, but it does so on borrowed assumptions. Each year lived beyond evolutionary expectation increases the gap between what healing can deliver and what time demands. This gap is not accidental. It is the natural consequence of extending life without extending design. Aging, in this sense, is the visible cost of longevity. It marks the point where ancient biology meets modern duration and reveals, quietly and steadily, the limits that were always there. As modern longevity exposes ancient limits, those limits do not appear evenly across the body. Aging unfolds unevenly because different systems carry different histories of stress, repair, and compensation. Some tissues were used intensely and repeatedly throughout early human life. Others were protected, spared, or only intermittently challenged. Healing followed those patterns. Where stress was frequent, repair was frequent. Where repair was frequent, structure changed more often. Over a long lifespan, these differences become pronounced. The body does not age as a single unit. It ages as a collection of systems, each shaped by its own past. In early human environments, this unevenness rarely mattered. Life was short, and decline did not have time to differentiate itself. Today, with decades added to the human lifespan, the body reveals its internal diversity. Joints, connective tissue, and systems involved in movement often show aging earlier because they were central to survival. They absorbed repeated stress and were repaired many times under pressure. Organs that operated with greater redundancy or lower mechanical strain often change more slowly. This uneven exposure explains why aging feels inconsistent. One part of the body may recover well while another lags behind. Healing has not failed globally. It has followed local histories. Each system carries the record of how often it was pushed to adapt rather than renew. Modern time allows those records to surface. Healing systems respond locally, not centrally. They do not coordinate aging across the body. They address damage where it occurs and move on. As a result, long-term outcomes diverge. Areas with heavy adaptive history become less flexible. Areas with lighter histories retain capacity longer. This divergence creates the impression that aging is unpredictable. In reality, it is patterned by past use. Evolution did not design the body to equalize these outcomes. It rewarded immediate survival, not balanced longevity. A system that supported movement, defense, or reproduction received constant reinforcement, even if that reinforcement carried long-term costs. Systems less critical to early survival were allowed to remain relatively untouched. Over a long life, this difference becomes visible as uneven aging. Healing contributes to this pattern by prioritizing continuity over uniformity. It does not redistribute resources to maintain balance across systems. It responds where needed, when needed, without regard for long-term symmetry. In early human life, this strategy was effective. The body functioned as required. In modern life, it reveals its limitations. Uneven aging is not a flaw. It is the natural outcome of localized repair in a body never designed for extended duration. The more years we add, the clearer these patterns become. Healing cannot smooth them out because smoothing was never its role. It stabilizes function locally, not globally. This perspective changes how we interpret aging. Decline is not random. It reflects where the body has worked hardest to keep going. Modern longevity turns the body into a map of its own survival history. Healing writes that history in layers, and time makes it legible. The human body ages faster than it can heal, not everywhere at once, but where healing has been demanded most. The unevenness we observe is not evidence of malfunction. It is evidence of long service. Healing has done its job repeatedly, in specific places, under specific pressures. Aging marks the places where that job was hardest. When uneven aging becomes noticeable, it changes how people experience their own bodies. The decline does not feel uniform or logical. One ability remains intact while another weakens. One system recovers well while another struggles. This inconsistency often creates confusion and frustration because it clashes with the expectation that the body should age as a whole. Yet from a biological perspective, this unevenness is exactly what extended life reveals. The body is not failing randomly. It is expressing the long-term consequences of localized healing and adaptation. In early human life, experience of the body was immediate and practical. Strength, endurance, and recovery were judged by whether they allowed survival that day or season. There was little reflection on gradual change because time rarely allowed it. Modern humans, living far longer, become witnesses to slow shifts that were never meant to be observed. Healing continues to operate locally, addressing what is urgent rather than what is balanced. As a result, people experience aging as a series of surprises. A joint stiffens unexpectedly, recovery feels uneven, capacity fluctuates. These sensations are not signals of sudden breakdown. They are the subjective experience of a body whose systems have aged at different rates. The mind interprets this as loss, because it compares present ability to remembered youth. Biology does not make that comparison. It evaluates function only in the present moment. As long as basic tasks can be performed, the system considers itself successful. This difference in perspective creates tension. Humans perceive decline as personal failure or injustice. The body perceives it as acceptable variation. Healing responses remain focused on immediate threats. They do not attempt to harmonize the body across time. This is why aging often feels unpredictable from the inside. There is no central coordination guiding how decline should unfold. Each system follows its own history. Over a long life, the mind becomes aware of this divergence. Awareness itself becomes part of the experience of aging. People notice limitations that were once irrelevant. Healing no longer restores confidence, only function. The body continues, but it no longer reassures. In early human environments, this awareness would have had little consequence. Life demanded attention outward, toward survival. Modern life allows attention inward, toward bodily change. This inward focus magnifies uneven aging. It makes gradual shifts feel more significant than they are biologically. Yet these shifts are not new processes. They are old processes finally given time to show themselves. Healing has always worked this way. Time simply allows its patterns to become conscious experience. The human body ages faster than it can heal, not as a unified decline, but as a mosaic of changes unfolding at different speeds. The mind experiences this mosaic as inconsistency and loss. Biology experiences it as normal operation. Understanding this difference can soften the sense of betrayal people often feel toward their bodies. The body is not breaking a promise. It never made one. It is continuing to heal locally, cautiously, and efficiently, according to rules shaped long before long life became common. Aging feels personal because it is lived from the inside. It feels uneven because it is built that way. Healing remains present, but it no longer defines the experience. Time does. Modern longevity turns biological variation into lived awareness. What once passed unnoticed now becomes a daily companion. This is not a failure of healing. It is the natural outcome of observing a system over a duration it was never designed to explain to itself. The body continues. The mind notices. Aging becomes not just a biological process, but a relationship between expectation and design. As the body moves deeper into later life, its strategy shifts again, this time toward conservation. This shift is not dramatic and it is not announced. It unfolds quietly as the body begins to protect what remains, rather than attempting to restore what was lost. Healing does not disappear, but it becomes more selective, more cautious, and more economical. The body learns to spend less. Energy, which once supported growth, exploration, and recovery, is now guarded. This conservation is not a response to weakness. It is a response to longevity. The longer life continues, the more valuable stability becomes. In early human life, conservation was temporary, used during periods of scarcity or illness. In extended life, it becomes a default mode. The body reduces unnecessary movement, lowers metabolic ambition, and favors predictable patterns. These changes reduce immediate risk and preserve function, but they also limit the scope of healing. Repair is allowed where it is essential. Elsewhere, the body tolerates imperfection. This tolerance is often mistaken for decline. In reality, it is a form of restraint. The body is choosing safety over renewal. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. A stable organism that avoids collapse can persist longer than one that constantly attempts costly repair. Natural selection favored bodies that could endure uncertainty by conserving resources. It did not favor bodies that attempted continuous renewal at any cost. As a result, the human body carries a strong bias toward preservation once major life tasks are complete. Healing adapts to this bias. It becomes slower not because systems are broken, but because repair is no longer the primary investment. The body prioritizes balance, coordination, and internal order. Anything that threatens these is addressed. Anything that does not is deferred. Over time, this creates a widening gap between damage and repair. Aging accelerates not because damage increases dramatically, but because repair is deliberately restrained. The body is managing risk. In early human environments, this strategy would have extended survival through harsh conditions. In modern life, it defines the experience of aging. Recovery feels limited because the body is no longer willing to spend energy freely. It operates within a narrow margin designed to avoid instability. This margin protects against sudden failure, but it also reduces flexibility. Healing becomes maintenance. It keeps systems functioning within safe bounds rather than restoring full capacity. The body does not interpret this as loss. It interprets it as success. Stability is achieved. Life continues. From the human perspective, however, this shift can feel like betrayal. We expect healing to remain generous because we remember when it was. Biology does not share memory or expectation. It responds only to current conditions. As time extends, conservation becomes rational. The body is not resisting time, it is adapting to it. Healing changes because the cost of repair has changed. In a long life, every repair must be weighed against the need to preserve overall balance. This weighing is automatic, built into biological regulation. Aging reflects the outcome of countless small decisions made in favor of stability. The human body ages faster than it can heal because healing has been redirected. It no longer aims to restore youth. It aims to maintain order. This strategy keeps the organism intact, even as capacity narrows. It is the logic of endurance, not of renewal. Understanding this shift helps explain why aging feels gradual and controlled rather than chaotic. The body is not collapsing, it is conserving. It is choosing to last, even if lasting means letting go of what it can no longer afford to repair. As conservation becomes the guiding principle, the body begins to reduce risk by narrowing its range of responses. This narrowing is subtle and gradual. Movements become more deliberate. Physiological reactions become more predictable. Systems that once responded broadly now respond selectively. Healing adapts to this pattern. Instead of mobilizing large-scale repair, the body favors smaller, localized interventions that minimize disruption. The goal is no longer to restore maximum capacity, but to avoid destabilizing what still works. In early human life, such narrowing was temporary, used during injury or scarcity. In extended life, it becomes permanent. The body learns that variability carries cost. Wide ranges of motion, rapid shifts in activity, and aggressive repair all increase uncertainty. As time accumulates, uncertainty becomes more dangerous than limitation. Healing therefore aligns with restraint. It intervenes carefully, often incompletely, to preserve equilibrium. This strategy reduces the chance of sudden failure, but it also limits recovery. Systems that operate within a narrower range receive fewer signals to rebuild beyond that range. Over time, this reinforces the pattern. Reduced activity leads to reduced renewal. Reduced renewal makes further reduction more likely. The body enters a self-stabilizing loop. From the outside, this looks like decline. From the inside, it is control. The body is managing complexity by simplifying itself. Evolution favored this approach because it extended functional life under unpredictable conditions. A body that avoided extremes survived longer than one that pursued maximal performance. Natural selection did not reward late-life ambition, it rewarded persistence. Healing reflects that reward structure. It becomes less exploratory and more defensive. Repair focuses on preventing breakdown rather than expanding capacity. In modern life, this defensive posture defines aging. Healing still occurs, but it does so within tight boundaries. Recovery restores safety, not strength. Flexibility gives way to reliability. This shift explains why late-life healing often feels incomplete. The body is not attempting full restoration because full restoration carries risk. It might require energy the system cannot spare or changes the body cannot safely integrate. Conservation reduces those risks. The cost is reduced adaptability. Over decades, this cost accumulates. The body becomes highly stable but increasingly rigid. Healing maintains order within that rigidity. Aging advances as a controlled process, not a collapse. Each conservative repair reinforces the narrowed state. The body becomes skilled at living within limits. From an evolutionary perspective, this is success. The organism remains functional long enough to fulfill social and familial roles. There is no biological incentive to do more. Modern expectations, however, extend beyond this framework. We expect bodies to remain adaptable, resilient, and renewable across many decades. Biology offers endurance instead. Healing shifts to support endurance by reducing exposure to risk. This creates the sensation that aging accelerates even when damage does not increase dramatically. Repair is deliberately constrained. The body is not losing capacity at random. It is choosing where to stop investing. This choice is automatic, distributed across systems, and invisible to awareness. Aging becomes the visible outcome of many such choices. Healing becomes maintenance of a reduced but stable state. The human body ages faster than it can heal because healing has been redefined. It no longer seeks to recover what time removes. It seeks to ensure that what remains does not fail. This redefinition allows life to continue quietly within boundaries set by long duration. Understanding this helps clarify why aging feels orderly rather than chaotic. The body is not unraveling. It is simplifying itself in order to persist. Over long periods, conservation carries a quiet cost. What the body preserves, it also freezes. Systems that avoid risk lose opportunities to adapt. Healing that focuses on containment rather than renewal gradually reshapes what the body considers normal. This reshaping is subtle. It does not announce itself as loss. It feels like settling. Movements become familiar. Physiological ranges narrow. Responses grow predictable. The body becomes excellent at maintaining a reduced state. Healing supports this excellence by reinforcing what already works, instead of experimenting with change. In early human life, this trade-off was temporary and rarely limiting. Periods of restraint were followed by recovery, or by the end of life. In extended life, restraint persists. The body remains in a protective posture for years, even decades. Over time, the ability to expand beyond that posture diminishes. Healing can stabilize but not reopen possibilities that have been closed for too long. Tissues adapt to limited use by reorganizing themselves around that limitation. Systems become efficient within narrow bounds and inefficient outside them. This creates a body that functions reliably but struggles with novelty. Recovery from unfamiliar stress becomes difficult not because damage is greater, but because the capacity to reorganize has been reduced. The body is no longer practiced at renewal. Evolution did not penalize this outcome. A body that avoided surprise was more likely to survive under uncertainty. Selection favored predictability once growth and reproduction were complete. The cost of lost adaptability appeared too late to matter. Modern longevity allows that cost to accumulate. Aging, in this sense, reflects the long-term price of safety. Healing preserves order but gradually sacrifices flexibility. The organism remains intact, yet increasingly specialized for a narrow version of itself. From the inside, this feels like stability. From the outside, it appears as rigidity. Neither view is wrong. They describe different aspects of the same process. The body chooses to remain whole by becoming less changeable. Healing follows this choice faithfully. It reinforces existing patterns, stabilizes altered structures, and avoids reopening pathways that could destabilize balance. Over decades, this commitment reshapes identity at the biological level. The body becomes what it has been allowed to practice. Aging deepens as conservation persists. Damage does not need to increase dramatically for healing to fall further behind. The narrowing of possibility alone is enough. Repair can no longer restore what has not been used or challenged for years. The body has conserved itself into a form that resists renewal. This is not failure. It is the expected outcome of a system designed to endure uncertainty by minimizing risk. Healing has achieved its goal. Persistence. What it has not preserved is openness. Modern expectations often confuse these goals. We ask the body to be both safe and adaptable, both stable and renewable. Biology chose one. It chose to last. The human body ages faster than it can heal because healing has committed to preservation over possibility. Time extends this commitment until its consequences become visible. Aging appears as the gradual solidification of strategies that once protected life. Healing continues, but it works within walls it helped build. Understanding this reframes late-life decline not as abandonment, but as the culmination of a long strategy of survival. The body does not retreat. It settles. It becomes what it has learned is safest to be. When aging is viewed only through the lens of loss, it appears as a malfunction. Strength fades. Recovery slows. Capacity narrows. From this perspective, the body seems to be failing at a task it should be able to perform. Yet biology tells a different story. Aging is not the breakdown of a system that once worked correctly. It is the long-term expression of a system that worked exactly as it was designed to. Every design carries trade-offs. In the human body, those trade-offs favored early success over lifelong durability. Healing, energy use, and cellular behavior were tuned to maximize survival and reproduction under uncertainty. The costs of those choices were deferred. Aging is where those costs become visible. The body does not treat aging as an error because it is not one. It is the expected outcome of priorities, set early and followed consistently. In early human environments, this outcome was rarely observed. Life ended before trade-offs accumulated into limitation. Modern longevity removes that protection. We now live long enough to experience the full consequences of design decisions made for a shorter life. Healing continues to operate within those decisions. It does not attempt to undo them. It manages within them. This reframes aging as a consequence rather than a collapse. The body is not failing to heal properly. It is healing properly within constraints that were never meant to be tested over decades. When we see repair slowing and recovery becoming incomplete, we are not witnessing neglect. We are witnessing a system honoring its original priorities. Evolution did not optimize the body for endless maintenance, because endless maintenance did not increase survival in the environments that shaped us. It optimized for robustness early and efficiency under pressure. The price of that optimization appears later as reduced flexibility and slower healing. From a biological standpoint, this is not tragic. It is coherent. The body invests heavily where returns were greatest, then gradually shifts toward preservation once those returns diminish. Aging reflects that shift. It is the phase where the body stops trying to improve and focuses on avoiding collapse. Healing adapts accordingly. It becomes conservative, selective, and restrained. This does not mean the body gives up. It means it changes goals. Modern expectations often clash with this logic. We expect the body to maintain youthful repair because we value longevity and performance across the entire lifespan. Biology values continuity across generations, not perfection within individuals. The mismatch between these values creates frustration. We interpret aging as failure because we measure success differently than evolution does. From the body's perspective, aging is acceptable as long as basic function persists. Healing is judged successful if it maintains order, not if it restores youth. This perspective helps explain why attempts to reverse aging often struggle. They confront not a broken system, but a system fulfilling its design. Healing pathways are constrained because they are embedded within trade-offs that protect stability. Undoing those trade-offs risks instability the body is designed to avoid. Aging is therefore resistant not because it is powerful, but because it is integrated. It emerges from countless small decisions that favor safety, efficiency, and early success. Over a long life, those decisions accumulate into visible decline. The human body ages faster than it can heal, because healing was never meant to outrun the consequences of its own design. Aging marks the point where trade-offs become apparent. It is the moment when the logic of survival meets the reality of time. Understanding this shifts the question from how to defeat aging to how to live within a body shaped by unavoidable choices. Aging is not a betrayal by biology. It is biology keeping its side of an ancient bargain. The trade-offs that shape aging are not abstract ideas. They are built into the body in ways that are difficult to reverse because they are interconnected. Healing, energy use, cellular restraint, and conservation do not operate independently. Each supports the others. Together, they form a stable pattern that resists change. This is why aging feels locked in. It is not enforced by a single mechanism, but by many small constraints reinforcing one another. When healing slows, conservation increases. When conservation increases, flexibility decreases. When flexibility decreases, the body becomes less capable of rebuilding lost capacity. Each adjustment stabilizes the system while narrowing its future options. From an evolutionary standpoint, this locking was beneficial. A system that could drift freely late in life would have been more prone to instability. Natural selection favored bodies that settled into predictable states once early success was achieved. That predictability reduced catastrophic failure. It did not need to preserve adaptability forever. As a result, aging emerges as a self-reinforcing process. The more the body adapts to limitation, the more limitation becomes the baseline. Healing continues to operate, but it operates within a structure that has already accepted decline as normal. This acceptance is not conscious. It is encoded in feedback loops that regulate repair, energy expenditure, and risk. Attempts to push the body back toward youthful behavior often meet resistance because they disrupt these loops. Increased repair demands increased energy. Increased energy use threatens stability. The body responds by tightening control. From the outside, this looks like stubbornness. From the inside, it is protection. The body has learned that pushing too hard carries danger. Evolution reinforced this lesson repeatedly. Over long life, that reinforcement becomes dominant. Aging is therefore not something that happens to the body. It is something the body maintains. It maintains a state that prioritizes survival over renewal. Healing serves that state by preventing collapse, not by restoring potential. This explains why late-life improvements are often fragile. Gains can be made, but they are difficult to sustain because the system quickly returns to its preferred balance. The body is not opposing change out of neglect. It is enforcing a configuration that minimizes risk. In early human life, such enforcement was temporary. In modern longevity, it becomes permanent. The longer the body remains in this stabilized state, the harder it becomes to reopen pathways that support deep repair. Systems lose practice at renewal, signals weaken, structural flexibility declines. Healing responds accurately to immediate needs but cannot rebuild what has been systematically de-emphasized. Aging deepens as these patterns repeat. The trade-offs that once enabled survival now limit recovery. This is not because the body is poorly designed. It is because it is consistently designed. Every system follows the same logic. Protect what exists, avoid destabilization, accept gradual narrowing. Over decades, this logic produces the experience we call aging. The human body ages faster than it can heal because healing is embedded in a framework that values safety above restoration. Undoing aging would require undoing that framework. Biology resists this not out of error, but out of coherence. The system works too well within its own rules. Understanding aging as a locked set of trade-offs changes how we approach it. It shifts attention away from fighting the body and toward understanding its priorities. Healing has not been abandoned. It has been constrained by design choices that once maximized survival. Aging is the visible boundary of those choices. It marks the point where consistency overtakes possibility. The body remains functional, but it no longer chases improvement. It protects continuity. This is the deep reason aging persists despite healing. The two are not opposites. They are partners shaped by the same evolutionary logic, moving together toward a stable, limited state that reflects the body's original purpose. If aging is the visible boundary of biological trade-offs, then reversing it would require more than repairing damage. It would require undoing priorities that have been reinforced for a lifetime. This is why attempts to fix aging often encounter limits that feel immovable. Healing can address injuries, correct imbalances, and restore partial function, but it cannot easily rewrite the rules that govern how much change the body will tolerate. Those rules were learned gradually, reinforced by years of conservation and restraint. By the time aging is fully apparent, the body has already committed to a particular way of maintaining itself. Healing operates within that commitment. It is allowed to stabilize and preserve, but not to disrupt the balance that keeps the system intact. From the body's perspective, large-scale renewal is risky. It introduces uncertainty into a system that has learned to survive by minimizing surprise. Evolution favored this caution because it reduced catastrophic failure late in life. A body that avoided instability was more likely to persist than one that attempted dramatic renewal. Over decades, this preference becomes entrenched. The pathways that once supported robust repair lose influence. Signals that promoted growth and reorganization fade. Healing remains responsive, but its scope is narrowed by long practice. This explains why late-life improvements are often modest and fragile. Gains can be made, but they must fit within the existing framework. Anything that threatens stability is resisted. Not consciously, but through regulatory feedback that pulls the system back to its preferred state. Aging persists not because the body cannot heal, but because it has learned what kind of healing it will allow. This learning is cumulative. Each year of conservation reinforces the pattern. Each successful stabilization confirms the strategy. Over time, the body becomes increasingly specialized for endurance rather than renewal. The cost of reopening deeper repair pathways grows higher, not only in energy, but in risk. Biology chooses the safer option. From a human point of view, this feels like an unfair limit. We know what the body once could do. We expect it to do so again. Biology does not share that expectation. It measures success differently. Success is continued function without collapse. Healing is judged sufficient if it maintains order. Aging marks the point where that definition dominates. The body is not trying to return to youth. It is trying to remain coherent. This coherence is the final outcome of a long sequence of trade-offs that favored early success, efficient repair, and late-life stability. When we ask why aging cannot simply be undone by healing, the answer lies in this coherence. The system is internally consistent. Changing one part requires changing many others. Undoing aging would require undoing the very constraints that keep the body stable. Evolution never selected for that capacity because it offered no advantage in the environments that shaped us. As a result, aging is resilient. It is not maintained by a single weakness, but by the strength of a design that prioritizes safety over possibility. Healing and aging are therefore inseparable. Healing maintains the body within boundaries that aging defines. Aging defines the boundaries that healing respects. Together, they form a stable relationship. The human body ages faster than it can heal because healing was never meant to erase the consequences of its own success. It was meant to support life long enough to matter, then to preserve what remains. Understanding this does not provide a solution. It provides clarity. Aging is not an enemy to defeat, but a condition to understand. It is the final expression of a system that has followed its rules faithfully for a very long time. When all explanations are set aside, one question remains quietly present beneath everything we have explored. What does it mean to live inside a body that was never designed to heal forever? Modern humans often experience aging as a personal challenge, something to be resisted, delayed, or corrected. Yet biology tells a calmer story. The body is not falling short of an ideal. It is following a trajectory that was shaped long before long. Life became common. Healing was designed to serve survival, not permanence. Once that purpose was fulfilled, the body shifted toward preservation rather than renewal. Living into old age means living beyond the original expectations written into our biology. This realization changes how aging can be understood. Instead of viewing decline as failure, it can be seen as the visible edge of a design that prioritized early success and accepted later limitation. The body continues to heal, but it heals within boundaries that were never meant to be crossed repeatedly. From this perspective, aging is not something that happens to us. It is something we grow into as time extends. The body remains functional, responsive, and adaptive in modest ways, even as its capacity narrows. Healing still answers injury, still restores balance, still protects continuity. What it no longer promises is renewal without cost. This does not strip aging of its difficulty, but it reframes its meaning. The body is not abandoning us. It is remaining consistent. Much of the distress surrounding aging comes from expectation rather than biology. We expect healing to scale with time because life now does. Biology does not update expectations. It follows rules shaped under very different conditions. When these rules are understood, aging becomes less mysterious. It becomes a process that unfolds logically, even if it remains emotionally challenging. Living in a body that ages faster than it can heal means learning to inhabit limits rather than fight them blindly. It means recognizing that healing's role shifts from renewal to maintenance, from expansion to balance. In early human life, this shift was rarely noticed. In modern life, it defines experience. The body invites a different relationship with time, one that values continuity over restoration. Aging asks not how to return to what was, but how to remain present within what is. Healing supports this presence by preventing collapse, not by restoring youth. When viewed this way, aging becomes less of an enemy and more of a condition of extended existence. The human body was never shaped for endless repair, but it was shaped to persist, to adapt quietly, and to carry life forward for as long as possible within its means. Living with aging is therefore not about defeating biology. It is about understanding the bargain that made long life possible at all. The body gives us time beyond its original design. In return, it asks us to accept the boundaries that come with that gift. This exchange is not fair or unfair. It simply is. The question then becomes not how to stop aging, but how to live meaningfully within a body that heals enough to continue, even when it can no longer restore everything that time takes away. As understanding deepens, the relationship with the aging body begins to change. When healing is no longer expected to restore everything, attention shifts toward how the body sustains continuity. The body becomes less a project to fix and more a condition to inhabit. This does not mean resignation, it means alignment. Healing continues to play its role, quietly supporting balance, preventing collapse, and allowing life to proceed within narrower margins. The value of healing is no longer measured by how much youth it recovers, but by how steadily it preserves coherence. In early human life, this distinction was unnecessary. Survival demanded action, strength, and rapid recovery. In extended life, meaning arises from persistence rather than renewal. The body teaches this lesson slowly, through reduced speed, longer recovery, and careful movement. These changes are often interpreted as loss, yet they also represent a different form of reliability. The body becomes predictable. It signals clearly what it can and cannot afford. Healing supports this predictability by reinforcing patterns that maintain order. Living well within this framework requires listening rather than forcing. When expectations soften, the body's behavior becomes more intelligible. Aging reveals that healing was never meant to be generous forever. It was meant to be sufficient. That sufficiency is what allows continuity of experience, memory, and presence. The body remains a vessel for awareness, even as its capacities narrow. Healing protects that vessel by keeping systems within safe bounds. This protection is subtle but profound. It allows time to be lived, rather than merely endured. From this perspective, the final value of healing is not reversal but stability. It ensures that life does not end abruptly when renewal is no longer possible. This reframing opens a different understanding of care. Care is no longer about pushing the body back toward a past state. It is about supporting the balance it seeks. Gentle rhythms, consistency, and respect for limits align with the body's late-life priorities. Healing responds best to these conditions because they reduce conflict between expectation and design. Aging becomes less of a struggle when the body is no longer asked to violate its own logic. The human experience of time changes as well. Without the demand to restore youth, attention shifts to continuity of being. Each day is less about recovery and more about presence. Healing supports this presence by managing discomfort, stabilizing function, and allowing awareness to remain engaged with the world. The body does not promise endless capacity, but it does offer endurance. This endurance is not dramatic. It is quiet and steady. It reflects the deepest intention of biological design, to keep life going without collapse. Aging, when understood in this light, is not an enemy but a teacher of scale. It teaches what the body can sustain and what it must release. Healing accompanies this teaching by smoothing transitions rather than erasing them. The body ages faster than it can heal because healing was designed to accompany life, not to overpower time. Accepting this does not diminish the value of life. It clarifies it. Life becomes less about preservation of form and more about continuity of experience. The body continues to change, yet it remains the ground on which experience unfolds. Healing ensures that this ground stays intact enough to support awareness. In the end, living in an aging body is not about fixing what cannot be fixed. It is about understanding what healing was always meant to do. It was meant to carry life forward, gently and imperfectly, for as long as it can. This understanding does not answer every question aging raises. It leaves one open. If the body was never meant to heal forever, how might that knowledge change the way we value the time it gives us? At the very end of this long view, aging no longer appears as a problem to solve, but as a condition to live within. The body, having followed its design faithfully, arrives at a state where healing and time are no longer in competition, but in quiet agreement. Healing continues, not to restore what once was, but to support what still is. It works carefully, selectively, and without ambition. This final phase is not dramatic. There is no clear line where aging suddenly completes itself. Instead, life becomes a process of continuation within limits that are now fully visible. The body offers fewer possibilities, but it also demands less. Movement slow, recovery stretches, yet experience itself does not vanish. Awareness remains, memory persists, presence continues. Healing protects this continuity by preventing breakdown, not by promising renewal. In early human life, this stage was rarely reached. Time ended before the body's limits became a central feature of existence. Modern longevity allows humans to encounter this phase directly. With that encounter comes a choice of interpretation. Aging can be seen as loss, or it can be seen as exposure. The body is not revealing failure. It is revealing its truth. It shows what it was always built to do and what it was never meant to sustain. Healing's role becomes clearer here than at any other point. It was never meant to defeat time. It was meant to accompany life as it unfolded, adjusting, compensating, and preserving coherence as long as possible. When the body can no longer afford to rebuild, healing shifts toward guarding what remains intact. This guarding allows life to continue quietly, without collapse. It gives space for reflection, for memory, for connection, even as physical capacity narrows. From this perspective, the value of healing is not measured in years regained, but in moments sustained. Each day that proceeds without disruption is a success of the system. Biology does not count how much was restored. It counts whether order remains. Aging, in this sense, is not a defeat. It is the final expression of a long survival strategy that prioritized continuity over perfection. The human body was shaped to endure a dangerous world briefly. Modern humans ask it to endure time itself. Healing responds as best it can, but it does so within boundaries that were never designed to move indefinitely. Recognizing this can soften the struggle against aging. It does not remove discomfort or loss, but it removes the sense of betrayal. The body is not abandoning its task, it is completing it. Healing has carried life as far as it was built to carry it. Beyond that point, time becomes the dominant force, and healing becomes its companion rather than its challenger. The question then shifts away from repair and toward meaning. If healing cannot restore youth, what does it preserve? It preserves the possibility of presence. It preserves the continuity of experience that allows life to be lived rather than merely extended. Aging narrows the world, but it also clarifies it. The body becomes simpler, the demands become clearer. Healing maintains a ground that is stable enough for awareness to remain engaged. In this final phase, the body no longer promises growth. It offers persistence. That persistence is quiet, imperfect, and finite. Yet, it is enough to support a life that continues to be felt, remembered, and shared. When we understand aging this way, the human body's limits no longer appear as a design flaw. They appear as the closing shape of a long, consistent logic. Healing has done what it was meant to do. Time has done what it always does. What remains is the open question that cannot be answered biologically. If the body was never meant to heal forever, how does that change the way we choose to live within the time it still gives us?